Hello, everybody out there watching. We appreciate you being here live or during the recorded portion of what we're doing right now. This is going to be a Hangout talking about happiness and how can you get happy with your Hangouts and why does it matter? This show is sponsored by, as you see right behind me, what's called Hangout Mastery. It's a wonderful membership community where you get to learn all about Hangouts, everything you need to know, and maintain that knowledge. Because if you've been around it at all for any period of time, you know that the tool changes. So that's why we have an ongoing, wonderful community. Everybody in there is very, very helpful. And in fact, both these gentlemen that are here with me right now are also in that community. So let's talk about happiness and why does this matter. One of the things, and I'm going to start with the techie stuff for a moment, and then we're going to move more into the more psychiatry or the psychology or the things that are going on behind the scenes in our heads. But when we're doing Hangouts on air, it is a good thing when we can not be concerned about the technology. What I call let the technology disappear. You're never going to let it disappear if you don't know it. So you've got to get to the point where you can understand what buttons to push, when you push them, what's going to happen when you push them. Those things really do eventually need to be pushed out of your mind, and they're not something you focus on anymore, so that you're able to focus on the main thing, which is the message, and then secondarily, the audience. So what I like to do is I like to make these Hangouts, whenever possible, interactive. I want you out there in the viewing audience to be able to ask a question, and we bring those questions up with comment tracker and different techniques, and we show them on the screen, and we get this interaction going on. That's a whole nother layer, but if you're not into that quite yet, first things first, get to the point where the technology disappears. That's what you need to do. Secondarily, you now need to focus on what your message is. And this is where I want to bring Dave Williams in. He is my happiness advocate. Dave, you are now in the main window. Could you tell us a little about your background in happiness and how that all ties together, please?
Well, thanks first for inviting me to be here today. This is a fun topic and is one that seems to be critical. We have a lot of interest with a lot of people, and that's because, as you said, we're often have some fear and anxiety about our Hangouts. Certainly, in my experience, I've been working with video conferencing way back at the beginning of the millennium. In about 2000, 2001, I started helping people understand how to do video conferencing. And it was pretty common to be anxious about your presentation, feeling depressed about the results of your presentation. And today we've got this great Google Hangout, which is so different than the other conventional, traditional tools that I started with. And in the past, as a psychologist, I'd sit with people and try to help them understand why are they feeling anxious and what is it that is causing this depression. And the tools were pretty limited, and in fact, it was pretty traditional, the things everyone knows about. In fact, in the comment stream that we had, people were saying, you've got to do some deep breathing, you've got to meditate, you've got to listen to peaceful sounds, you've got to really try to center your mind, and then everything moves apart. Well, that's the tool set, that's the traditional direction, but it turns out that there's a lot of growth in this field and a lot of new ideas that are there. Fortunately, and I do say fortunately, a year ago, about the beginning of 2013, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer, and that put me into the hospital for about 15 months of surgery and chemo and radiation, and now we really were talking about anxiety and happiness, and all we were thinking about was when will this end and when will my life get together. And I started to reinvestigate how are we happy and why are we stressed. And I discovered that, man, there's been a lot of research. In fact, there's a whole new area called positive psychology that really addresses the wellness of things, not why are we doing things wrong, but what are we doing that's right. And spending a lot of time looking at optimism versus pessimism and why are we negative and fearful in so many situations and what to do about it. And that's over at University of Pennsylvania. In fact, I have a master's degree course called the Masters of Applied Psychology, or Happiness Psychology. Masters in Applied Positive Psychology, I'll get it right. And then over at Harvard, there's a happiness course. Sean Aker is heading that one up and has written a couple of books, the Happiness Advantage in particular, that he's running some training around, and that just opened up everything. It started to really investigate things from beyond the traditional meditation, yoga, centering your mind, and looking at a number of other things.
So I have a quick question for you. In the green room, before we started live, we were talking about how you've been getting actually a little bit of pushback about the idea that happiness is something that's important that you want to be talking about. Why do you think people are concerned or have a stigma about people that talk about happiness?
Well, the word itself is a trigger word, which is kind of interesting. You think it'd be a positive trigger word, but for some people, it's a negative word. In fact, we tend not to pay attention to the words that we use and the effect of using the words when we talk to people. And that's why I posted that article a day or so ago of talking about conversations and how the words we choose can create a negative or positive reaction. And happiness, to some people, is a bridge too far. It's not something that you can reach. It's a state of mind that isn't measurable. In fact, the best that you could do is measure contentment or measure satisfaction. You can measure being unhappy, but the opposite of unhappy isn't necessarily happy. Because if you think of it, people say to themselves, I'll be happy when I get my new car. I'll be happy when the operation is over. I'll be happy when my HOA is successful. It's always about when, and if it does happen, you get this little spike of pleasure, but you don't really have a continuous feeling of contentment or satisfaction. It wanes very, very quickly. And that word happiness is something that's hard for people to grasp.
Well, let's talk about those spikes in a minute, because that's something I do want to talk about, the chemical things that go on in our brains, in our bodies. But from my perspective, sometimes when people talk a lot about happiness, you start to think they're a little ditzy. I don't know if that word translates that well, but they're just not serious enough to be paid a lot of attention to. And I just think that's not quite right. I mean, sure, there's going to be extremes on either end, but you can be a very knowledgeable, serious presenter with legitimate information and still be happy. Isn't that right?
Well, indeed, because you really want to redefine what that word happiness means to you and your audience, particularly when you're on stage. This whole concept of, well, I'm overly optimistic, overly bouncy, overly effusive, is, oh, that must be the person so happy. But a lot of people who are very calm and content in what they're doing, and it comes across as very professional, and you don't get that emotional feedback from them that, oh, they're really at a high level of happiness, and yet they're very happy in terms of their own analysis of what's going on. So it's, again, a set of words that we're using that gets confusing when you start to look at someone else and make judgments. Is their behavior really representative of their true happiness, or is happiness something that is just something internal? In fact, the professional definition of happiness is, is not about moments of pleasure. It really is about the pursuit of finding meaning and self-development and attainment of your goals. And if you are in that journey of developing those and achieving those things that you find valuable, your state of happiness rises, and it's continual, beyond just being satisfied and contented with what your lot in life is.
I'm gonna throw this up here. This is from Kara, saying that this is going to be great because she has to admit gets a little nervous about Hangouts on air. So when we talk about nervousness or fears, in essence, in my mind, nervousness comes from fear. You're afraid something's going to go wrong. What are the things that happen when we have happy thoughts versus sad thoughts and nervous thoughts?
Yeah, certainly the first real takeaway point of the day is that we all have a negativity bias, and that gets in the way of everything that we do. It's a natural reaction to living in this world of ours. Back in the day, the ancestors were worried about falling rocks and tigers eating them. And so their body became attuned to recognizing potential danger and was always scanning the horizon for a way of protecting yourself, and your body then went into the traditional fight or flight response. Today, we've updated that. We're not afraid of tigers and falling rocks, but our body still is scanning for danger, and danger is the risks of our life. So when you do an HOA, oh my goodness, the audience may not like me. Oh, my message may not be understood. Oh, I may freeze up. There's a whole bunch of fear and anxiety that we're creating, and our body starts to react to it biochemically, which is the second takeaway, is not only do we have a bias towards negativity for protecting ourselves, we actually create chemicals within our body that enhances that feeling of negativity, increases the stress, increases the anxiety that we're going through, and that's usually from a hormone called cortisol that is released in those moments of stress, and it floods your body in order to protect you, because then your body and organs and everything will get ready to protect you. You'll be able to fight, you'll be able to run, etc. And it lasts for about 26 hours when it starts to flood. So if you're feeling anxious about your HOA and you start thinking about it over and over again, it's like pumping in the bad chemicals into your body on a continual basis, and your anxiety rises and you can't get rid of it. Biochemically, you can balance it out by thinking positive thoughts. And I'm not thinking of, don't worry, be happy. It has to be realism. You have to be looking at positive experiences that you bring in to create a different kind of chemical flow that's dealing with something called oxytocin. And when that floods your body, it counteracts the effect of cortisol and calms you down. In fact, it actually does physiological repair of those organs that were under stress. And so you want to get more oxytocin in your body, and that only comes from positive thoughts and positive experiences, but they only last for about 6 to 8 hours. So you've got an interesting chemical balance going on, that you have a negative thought and it floods your body for 26 hours. You have a positive thought to try to deal with it, and it only lasts for 8 hours. So what do? Well, you've got to have 3 or 4 or 5 positive thoughts in order to shoot the right good chemical system into your body, in order to balance out and lower that particular feeling of anxiety about your HOA, or fear of failure, or risk, or even the negative comments that you get from people. Like you were saying just a minute ago, when people were challenging me, how dare I talk about the word happiness? That negative thought stays with us, and you dismiss all the positive comments that people make. So when you say, let's have a HOA, oh, you don't really give good HOAs. Wow, man, from one person, that just floods your mind, and that overrides all the positive comments you've ever gotten from people who thought you really were good at doing your HOAs.
Yeah. Let me bring up a comment here from Christopher. Thanks, Michael, for bringing that up. Happy HOAs are here again. The skies above are clear again. It's Ronnie Bincer. We will hear again. Happy HOAs are here again. So the fun part about happiness is when it's there, and like you're saying, I didn't realize that we needed multiple happy things to counteract the negative things, or the sad or the non-happy things.
At least 3 to 1.
Yeah, and that seems crazy. Why are we made that way?
Well, I mean, as was said, the first desire of the body back in the day was to protect yourself and give you lots of energy, lots of strength, lots of resilience in order to escape the situation or fight through that situation that you were in, fighting the neighborhood group. Feeling good, warm, and fuzzy was, a healing mechanism. You could come back from the fight and then sit around the campfire and have the hugs from your family and your friends and your neighbors, and recover from that battle that you had just gone through. And so it was a slower healing process, and you usually got more of that to recover. And as people said, wow, you fought well, and now you can, be part of our team again, and you can be part of the family and help us all, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got a slow recovery process that balances this immediacy to protect you, and you have to pay attention in your head. What is it that you're doing that stimulates this action biochemically if you really want? And that's why meditation and centering your mind and yoga and so forth try to do is to calm those bodily reactions so that you're really not having to deal with the cortisol that's still flowing and flowing over something that's that you've regarded as potentially a danger or threatening to you in some way.
Okay, let's bring up a comment from Mark saying also there is a fear of rejection versus acceptance. And this is something that I know what helped me with these Hangouts things is the fact that I had a history of being able to be a trainer. And so when I'm doing Hangouts and I'm teaching people how to use Hangouts, this is sort of a natural area for me. So when it's not a natural place, you're going to wonder about, can you do it? Is this possible? Can you even make it happen? And one of the most obvious things to me as a trainer is to encourage people to start practicing, because practicing lets you get through some of those feelings. And sometimes that practicing should be done in a place where not everybody's watching. So you can make these Hangout on Air things what are called unlisted, and you can make them and run a show. Just run the whole thing as if it's real, because it is, but maybe no one else is watching it, and then go watch it and pass it around to some of your friends that might give you some hopefully good feedback that'll help you determine when you're ready to go live. Because if you start right away and you don't do so well, you will have legitimate reasons why you might be a little concerned about it.
You've got it down, Pat. You've really understood, because what you're bringing up is another takeaway, and that is the neuroplasticity of the brain. In other words, you can rewire the way the brain processes its reaction to the environment that it's in. The brain will actually navigate itself to the negative, but if you're bringing in the positive, it will navigate its way to that, and it only will work through repetitive instances where it now says the appropriate behavior for this particular situation I have learned is, and you've repeated it, and that's why they say if you want to change a habit, it takes 21 days of repetition. You've got to run it through a course in order to reprogram the brain so that you can now focus in on what's important. In fact, another major takeaway is you should focus on what went right, not what went wrong, which is, again, something that's counterintuitive, particularly with HOAs. Because what's the first thing that we do is we say to someone, well, how did your HOA go? Well, now the person's natural reaction is to relive all of those fearful elements and what they did and what the reaction was and so on, instead of saying, your question should have been, what was the best part of your HOA? Because if the person asks that, then that's the part that you're focusing in on. And then a very interesting study that I was reading a couple of weeks back about some bowlers. And I like bowling. Some of you out there may like bowling. And they discovered that you took the groups and split the bowlers into one group who you just said everything that went wrong and why they didn't hit the pins the way they should, why their scores were wrong, highlighted all the things that normally you do to improve a skill. The other group, they didn't talk about anything they did wrong, they just focused on everything that they did right. And that group then, both groups would rehearse through their mind what it was that they were learning. Here's all the things I did wrong, and I won't do them again. And the other's one going over and over again, here's all the things I did right. And the end result was you got 100% improvement in bowling performance for those who were only reinforced for the activities that they had done well. And so when I think of doing an HOA and helping someone through it, and you do your post-mortem analysis, And rather than point out all the things that you normally would navigate to, stop that and just move right over to all the things you did right, and then the person would just reinforce that, and I'll guarantee that the next HOA will be an improvement over the last one, without even thinking about improving the so-called things they did wrong. So focus in on what's right, don't focus in on what's wrong.
Great tips. The idea of being a coach, I believe, many times brings in that idea of helping somebody focus on those things that were good, and appropriately, and this is where you get tricky, finding a way to bring in the ability to say, here's how we can improve this, which will take you to another layer where you can do that well as well.
Let me just add to that, because I am a coach, a baseball coach, and baseball, if you think about it, baseball is even a better analogy, because if you batted 9 times and got on base 3 times, you have a 333 average. You know, 333 average in basketball. If I shot my shots and made 33% of it, I'm not going to be playing basketball. If I threw passes in football, I'm not going to be playing football if I only threw 33% passes. But in baseball, you're in the Hall of Fame if you have a 333 average. But you know what? That's a positive thing. You know, I have kids all the time that tell me, oh, yeah, I got on, but I reached by error. No, you're on base. That base runner is huge in baseball. Your advantage now, I make them look at the positive part. The advantage of you being on base, regardless how you got there, whether they made a mistake, whatever else, let them have the negative part on them. We're going with the positive part, and it's huge. It helps so much. And it's a game of failure. I call it a game of failure because, like I said, that 333 average is terrible in any other sport. So, and you have one chance. You know, it's you against 9 guys. It's not like a team where, you know what I'm saying, those kind of things. So I use that positive all the time. And you know I'm into baseball. I had to bring it out, Ronnie.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool, Michael. So Dave, when people are concerned about you talking too much about happiness, what are you telling them?
Well, I try to reframe the question into something that they do find comfort with, and that's, are you positive or are you negative? Are you seeing the glass half full or half empty? As a way of starting to explore what are they defining or using to define the word happiness. As Sean Aker says, why do we even care about whether you see the world half empty or half full? Or see the glass half full or half empty. If you had the pitcher of water beside it, you could fill that glass up anytime you wanted, and you wouldn't care any longer about looking at the world in a particular way at all. You draw upon all the resources that are around you. And that's really the thing that a lot of folks don't appreciate. They feel there are limitations to what they can do, and they're looking at this nature of, well, I am just a pessimistic person. I was born that way and I'll always be that way. Or I'm an upbeat person and I was born that way. Well, yes, genetics can predetermine a particular level of optimism or pessimism or happiness. But it's like weight. Your DNA says you're a certain body type with a certain weight level, but you can increase it and decrease it through exercise, training, eating habits. You can do the same thing with positivism and optimism, negativism, by simply ignoring the DNA baseline that you were born with and starting to focus in on positive experiences in your life, which raises that baseline level into something that makes you look at life differently. And again, through this reprogramming of the brain, if you're doing the positive experiences always on a minimum of a 3-to-1 relationship basis, then you'll start to see the world in a different way, and you'll start to feel better because you're getting the expectations that you have met and sustained over time. They're not just a moment of pleasure. You know, I ate, like, as some of you know, I love chocolate at Easter, and I like to have my bunny rabbit so I can chomp on the ears first, and I get this glee in my face like a 9-year-old. Look at that, I ate the bunny ears. And that's that moment of pleasure, and at that moment, yeah, I'm really happy. but in terms of all the other dimensions of my life, I'm not necessarily happy. They're not all balanced. So I need to reprogram my negativism, my natural negativism focus into more positive focus in order to deal with the life events that are coming my way and try to see life in a more positive format.
Yeah, and one of the advantages, and just to circle it back because we're getting close to the ending time here.
Oh, yeah.
If we're going to focus on using this tool that we're talking through right now, this Hangout on Air broadcasting communication magical tool, being in an environment where there's a group of people that can help you remain happy, help you feel comfortable with the tools, like we're doing with the Hangout Mastery. You don't have to come there. I'd love it if you did. But find a place where you can join in with other people and you can practice. And the comment that Michael had up for a while, I was about to bring on screen, if you're going to bring that back for us, Michael, this is from Volker, talking about, if you can find it. It talked about practicing and practicing being embarrassed. There we go. Practice being embarrassed, learn to know your fears and reactions. If you do that in an environment that's positive, where people are willing to be vulnerable and be willing to test and play with some of the way these tools work, you're all working together for a common goal of everybody getting better. And if you're in an environment that is positive, like I promise you the Hangout Mastery one is, that you will then grow and become knowledgeable in your ability, but also happier, because you're going to have the ability to focus on these positive things that have worked and then realize, like I'm going to bring this up from Todd Smith. He's a golfer, right? He's saying if he focused on all the things that went wrong on his golf stroke, he would have given up many years ago. But he remembers and tries to remember those shots that are good, and that keeps him coming back to the golfing world.
And that memory that he has probably brings up a feeling of gratitude that is a positive feeling, and that sense of living in the moment, in the present, as they say, which is what yoga and meditation is trying to do, is to get you to feel grateful for what is happening in your life. And the HOA is, particularly the communities that are supporting the HOAs, are not just a forum of solutions. They're a group of people helping other people. The whole role of the community is really very strange in the Google world, because it is made up of people who really do want to help other people, and they in turn feel good about helping other people, and I feel good about receiving that help. I mean, you can't lose the focus that we're in a hangout. Hanging out is different than a webinar, a presentation where you're presenting information. Today we're presenting information, but we're not using PowerPoint. We're not in presentation mode. We're in host mode. We're trying to network. We're trying to be friends. You're bringing up comments. We're trying to support one another. We're trying to find solutions for people. At the same time, we're educating and passing on information, but we're hanging out and acting like a host or a co-host or whatever, much like you do at home when you invite people to your house for a party, and you're the host and you roll around making sure everyone's needs are being met, and you feel good about that. So by paying attention to those things that are happening to you every day, at the end of the day, if you're reviewing, and I know people say, well, I've heard of a gratitude journal. That's where I review the day and I write those good events down. It's not just pop psychology. It actually, at the end of the day, brings in more oxytocin that deals with those negative elements that happen during the day, that the cortisol is flooding your body, and that sense of gratitude for all the things, how small they are, whether it was the nice purr of the cat, or stroking my wonderful dog, even calling the dog Joy. You know, the things that bring a smile onto your face are the things that you're grateful for. You're focusing in on the small stuff, not waiting for the big event, and then you have a sense of positive experience about them, which I always say, you know, let's store them. Let's, you know, in the vernacular, let's save them in your heart, because that's where you can draw upon them in the future in order to deal with those stressful, fearful events that you have to fear or worry about, as long as you've got at least a 3-to-1, and in some cases 5-to-1 ratio that you're working under, you'll suddenly find your HOAs are better, the interaction with your audience is better, and when someone does give up a so-called negative comment of what happened, you don't dwell on that. You'll say, yes, but here's all the other things that came out of it, so that I am in the happiest place in the world. I don't have to go to Walt Disney World to experience that. I can do it right here in the HOA and in the Hangout, like Hangout Mastery.
Fantastic. Thanks for that wrap up. We're going to now end the show to stay on time, and thank you, Michael, for helping us wrangle the comments. Wonderful job. And Dave, I am so glad I've met you, and you earlier on helped me get to the point where I felt much more confident in what I was doing, primarily because you brought in a certain level of joy to what I was doing. You made me feel so confident in my abilities that it just really did change things. So I want to publicly thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you being part of my life with that. So,
and I appreciate you being there as well. We're best bros, as they say.
Yeah. Okay. So everybody out there, thank you for joining in with today's show, the Happiness Hangout, and we hope that this has helped you learn certain techniques and skills that you want to apply that'll help you make your life happier as well as your Hangouts on air. So we'll see you in another show. Bye now.
Bye now.